Hi everyone, it's October 21st, 2021, and we're going to do something a little different today. I'm going to tell you a story about one of my experiences. Um, I think I posted a sigil the other day, and I picked it up from Joshua P. Warren, who is a paranormal researcher and also an author. He does podcasts, he's an entertainer, he's been on TV, he has a museum in North Carolina. He also does stuff in Vegas. I mean, he's just all over the place with the paranormal stuff. He's freaking amazing. The first time I ever came across his work or knew about him was a few years ago. I was watching an episode of Beyond Belief with George Nuri, and he interviews people, kind of like Art Bell used to do on the radio, if you know who that is, about paranormal things or metaphysical things. And I was really fascinated with him talking about sigils. And sigils are basically symbols that carry a certain energy to them. So I'm not going to get into that right now, and we could talk about it another time. But either way, I went to his website after I saw his interview, and I printed out a few sigils. And one of the ones I printed out was a psychic sigil, because I had decided at that point that I could not deny my ability anymore, and it was time to start really exploring it and learning about it. And I thought, well, any little bit's going to help me, right? So I put the sigil on my fridge. So this is, gosh, almost 3 years ago. And kind of didn't really think much about it. I mean, I looked at it every day. I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But after a few weeks, yeah, stuff started to happen. A lot of stuff. Some really great and some not so great. And part of the reason I think the bad stuff was happening was the relationship I was in was falling apart terribly. So I think the energy we were pulling in was psychic, but it wasn't necessarily the best thing. But either way, that's when my ability started to build. And the validation I had that it was indeed psychic ability and it wasn't coincidence and it wasn't my imagination was people around me that knew me or spent time with me were also experiencing things. And I was able to start doing some channeling and some reading and so forth. Well, anyway, I didn't completely understand what I was doing. I didn't know who to turn to. It was just kind of one of these weird things. So I'm going to tell you a story about the most, in my opinion, life-changing thing that happened to me psychically ever. That just changed everything I thought about my abilities. This happened Christmas of, I think it was 2019. So yeah, a few years ago. And my boyfriend and I were at home and we were watching the news, and there was a story. It was right around Christmas time, a couple days before Christmas Eve. This woman went missing. Her name was Jill. And I saw the story, and I guess she had been at a friend's house in the area we lived in Central California, and had dinner and left and never made it home. And the area we live in, we generally don't have foul play. You know, it was not a high crime area. It was very country, everybody knows each other. The area she had dinner in was very rural. It was by a lake out in the middle of nowhere in our area. So it seemed odd that she went missing like that completely. Nobody could find a car. They looked everywhere and so forth. And I didn't really give it a ton of attention at the time. Well, the day before Christmas Eve, I woke up and I felt really weird, like this weird tension. And I go out into the living room, and up pops the news, like there was a loop of news going, and brought that story up again. And as soon as I saw the story, I started hearing, and when I say hearing, not in my ear, but in my mind, hearing, you gotta find her. You gotta find her. And it was this sort of heavy, like Germany sounding voice. You gotta find her, like an older lady. And I'm like, whoa. And my boyfriend looks at me and he says, what's going on with you? And I said, we gotta go find her. Well, he had also picked up ability. And I think the sigil had a lot to do with it. And also him just believing what was happening. He didn't even question it. I got to give him credit. As much of a schmuck as he could be at times, he totally supported me on this. So we packed up the car. We put pylons. We put blankets. We put food, water, everything I could think of that would make this person feel comfortable when we found her, because I was just sure we were going to have to find her, right? And police had no success finding her. They had a lot of different ideas, but they weren't sure. Well, I had an entire series of things come to mind for me, and I was writing them down as quickly as I could. So some of the things that came to mind for me was that her nickname was Jelly Beans, that I was actually there where she was, sitting in her car. And what I saw happen was, I believe she dropped something on the floor, and when she reached down to get it, she pulled the steering wheel like this, and she was going fairly fast. And when she did that, she lost control of her car, and it literally launched. And I in my mind, could see this happening in slow motion almost, like launched off this rural road she was on, and ended up landing in these trees that went down this deep embankment, or even a hill, I guess you could call it, a mountain even. And she was sort of perched between branches, sort of not totally in a very good position. And I almost like I was in her body, and I was like going, what do I do? Like, I was afraid to move because of the precarious situation the car was in. And I knew that there was cold, cold water down below. And I was in this little car, little compact car. And I remember there was a, like an Asian thing hanging from the mirror, like a little carved Asian thing with like a red tassel hanging down. Sometimes you see them at Chinese restaurants or whatever, but anyways, it was this thing hanging from the mirror. And I remember, like, I was thinking to myself, well, I know I have water and I've got a snack here in the car, and, you know, maybe someone will find me. And I kept hitting the horn over and over again and yelling and trying everything I could to get attention, knowing full well that where I was not a very safe place and probably not going to be noticed. Well, as it turned out, as I experienced what this poor woman was experiencing, she started getting really mad. Like, I started to get mad. Like, what the hell? You know, is nobody going to find me? What do I do? I can't just sit here and die. I knew a couple sunsets had already gone by, so I knew how long I'd been sitting there. I'd already, like, basically relieved myself in my clothes because I had nowhere to go, and was just waiting basically to either die or figure something out. So it got to the point in this vision, and I got to tell you, this vision was like within about a 20-second time thing, but it's longer because I'm telling you the story. I decided, F this, I'm going to get out of this car because I'm going to die no matter what unless I try. So I went to open the door, and I started kind of trying to get the door open. It wouldn't really open, and the car started to kind of move, and that's all I saw. Okay, that's all I got. So I started to feel very panicky. In the meantime, we're driving an hour north from where we live to go look for this woman. Okay, and I looked at a map, and I said, I think she's right here, and I pointed to a certain spot. I cannot read maps. I don't know why I thought that particular spot, but my boyfriend was good at maps, so he had a good idea where this was. So we drive to the car, and the other thing I saw in my vision was a like a piece of a culvert, like a metal culvert, you know, those tubes that they put on the side of the road to like direct water, but it was like a piece of it. So it was like a loop on the side of the road, and I saw sort of like a little bit of a skid mark. So I thought, okay, when I see that, that's going to be a signal to me that's where she is. And by the way, the throat thing is part of my psychic ability, by the way, which, again, I'll talk about another time. So I apologize for the throat clearing, but that's part of what I do. So, and it was cold. And I think I've mentioned to you folks I have a back injury. So walking around with my back the way it was, not good. But I was so in a panic because that voice kept saying, find her, find her, find her, find her, find her. And I was like, okay. So we drive around, and we get to this one curve in the road, and I say, pull over. So we pull over. I just felt like it was the right place. And I got out, and we beat the horn, and we yelled, and we walked around, and we tried all these things, and nothing. But I felt her, and it was really bothering me. And the voice kept saying, you got to keep trying, you got to keep trying. So we drove all over that area of the county for hours. I kid you not, from like 8 in the morning till like 3 or something. And I kept coming back to that same spot, and we kept getting out and looking, and we kept not finding her. And it really started to get to me. So around 3 o'clock, we get out of the car again at that same curve. And I give my ex total credit for being patient with me because, man, he didn't even give me a hard time about it at all. And I think because he felt it too. So I get out of the car, and we're screaming, and we're yelling, and we're honking the horn, and nothing's happening. And I might get emotional because it's very emotional for me. So, okay. So I suddenly got very, very cold, like down to the bone cold. Like I could not. If you've ever had the shivers where your whole body is racked, like it hurts almost to shiver, that's what I started to do. And I couldn't breathe, like almost like a horrible panic attack would feel, I would imagine. And I'm hearing that voice kind of going, hurry, 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 like this. Ugh. So my boyfriend looks at me and goes, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "No, something's happening. I think she's drowning." And the only reason that came out of my mouth was because if you watched any of my videos, I mentioned the fact that I drowned when I was a child and I had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, which is part of the reason I think I have this ability. So I start drowning, allegorically, I guess. And all of a sudden, it just got weirdly quiet, like everything. How I felt, the air, the vibration, the energy. And both my boyfriend just stood there looking at each other. And I said, "It's over." And I felt bad that I couldn't find her. But I knew I was supposed to. So, anyway, we went home. Got in the car and went home. And then some other weird things happened. So I was telling you that where we went was an hour north of where we lived. Well, on the way home, we had some kind of weird glitch where we suddenly were from one spot about 40 miles away from our house to about 5 minutes from our house. And both of us experienced it. Like, suddenly we both felt weird for just this weird, almost dizziness in the car while we're driving. And then suddenly we were almost home. And both of us went, "What the F just happened?" It was weird. So we drove in silence. And if anybody knows me, you know I am never quiet. And I couldn't speak. The emotion was, as you see, so strong. To this day, it still upsets me. And him too. So we got home, and we're sitting there, and sure enough, we flip the TV on. There's the news again, and they say, at 3, whatever time it was, we found Jill Stevens at the bottom of Lake Nacimiento. And apparently, when she left her friend's house, instead of going home the normal way she would go, which is where the cops kept retracing looking for her, she decided to take a scenic route. Well, Lake Nacimiento looks like a dragon if you look at it from above. There's some areas that are more popular and areas that are a little less noticed or frequented. And apparently she went a different route, and I can't remember now if she went south or north, but anyway, she went a different way around the lake. Maybe she just felt like going for an evening drive, or who knows. But either way, I looked at the map where they found her later, and it was exactly where that curve was that I kept looking, due, I believe, west. Well, there was no way, unless I drove into the lake and went all the way around the lake, would I have ever been able to find her. So I was parallel to where she was. I just couldn't get to her. So I was mostly correct, right? So that was the first thing that was pretty wild. Well, then, as it turns out, some history came out about her a couple days later, of course, because, there was an obituary and all this stuff. And, I'm sorry, a couple of the other things I wrote down, let me back up. A couple of the other things that I wrote down on the paper besides her nickname, and I had written down something about her working with animals and volunteering. And when I was in her moment in the car, I remember going through my life in my mind, or her life, excuse me, and seeing all these things I had done for people and thinking, why is this happening to me? I am so good to people. Do I deserve this? I remember thinking that. It was very weird. So sure enough, she was like I don't remember if she was a teacher or admin or something in San Francisco, and worked in Asian studies and was very involved in the Asian community. And she volunteered at local animal shelters or something like that. Again, I may have the story a little bit off now because it's been a while. I probably would have to look up what I wrote down, but I'm giving you what I remember. So the Asian amulet hanging from her mirror in her car made sense, right? So everything kind of came together. So then I debated about going to her funeral, thinking maybe I should go and see, what happens. And I just was scared. I was very scared and very confused about what my part was in this and why was I the one that was contacted to do something. And I thought about calling the police and those sorts of things. But again, I thought they're going to think either I'm crazy or I know something you know, and I could be implicated in some type of murder or something. I don't know. So I kind of just sat on it for a couple days, but I went into a deep depression, I'll be honest with you, and so did my boyfriend. We both felt awful about it. Like we felt like we failed. That's not the end of the story. So stay tuned for the next part because it gets really wild.